So to me, MTV's Catfish is one of those shows that was so ahead of its time. Like the idea that you'd have a whole show dedicated to online relationships and also where one person is maybe suspecting the other partner is not exactly who they say they are. That is like an online experience that a lot of people are now familiar with. MTV recently announced that it's canceling Catfish after 9 seasons. And before we get into this entire conversation of Catfish's legacy, I just want to remind you of what it was like to just watch an episode of Catfish.
I met Katie on a texting app. We chatted as much as humanly possible for the last 6 years. I was really excited that our love was finally going to cross over into a real relationship. But she killed that idea completely only a few weeks afterwards without explaining why. It's a little unclear what's going on here.
There are a lot of gaps in the
Let's
story.
just call this guy. Hey, Spencer, how you doing?
Oh man, I'm excited to see you guys. Thank you for talking to me.
You obviously have high hopes for this episode.
Yeah, I think this is going to be your best episode ever.
Whoa, why is that?
Yeah.
All right, well, Katie is Katy Perry.
Right. If you watch the show, then you'll know that it was a mix of investigative journalism and reality TV. And sometimes the people who come on the show think they've been dating Katy Perry for a little while. To talk about the legacy of Catfish, Candice Lim is here. Candice, hello, friend. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Nice.
Hello, Elamin.
And I know you're not catfishing me because I can see your face, and that's delightful. So listen, you wrote a whole article for Slate about why you loved Catfish. What is it about the show that got you?
Yeah, so I think 2 things. The first is I do believe Catfish taught me how to be a journalist because it came out in 2012. I was in high school and I was really obsessed with how little power I had just like as a kid. And so I was like, I think what would be really fun is, using reverse phone lookup, reverse image searching, finding out where my high school teachers lived and who they voted for, just for fun, no harm. And that's half of it. But the other half of it is the fact that I really think that Catfish taught me how to use the internet. Because at that time, I think a lot of my older adults in my life were very abstinence only, very like never use the internet, never meet someone online, never talk to a stranger online. Fast forward to 2025, I'm on Facebook Marketplace. Hey, dating apps are now like this normalized thing. Yeah. Meeting someone on Reddit to exchange tickets. Like that is a very normalized thing. And so in my head, I was like, abstinence only is just not the most efficient way of navigating your relationship to the internet. Instead, Catfish, I feel like was a masterclass at giving me the tools to like suss out, play defense of like, how do I figure out if someone's scamming me? But more importantly, let me get there quicker so that I don't have to go on an MTV show to figure out if the love of my life is not who he says he is.
First of all, just obsessed with the idea of you during recess being like, guys, you'll never guess who's a registered Republican. Like this idea of you pulling that information during recess because you're that online sleuth in 2012. Incredible. Just an incredible image, truly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if I'm allowed to go there, I did have 2 breaking stories, which is that one, I found out that one of the nerdiest teachers at my school played for the San Diego Padres. Yeah, I confronted him in class, and I said, "Where'd the sauce go?" And he left.
The sauce is not in the building anymore. It's gone. Yes.
Boneless. And then the second one is that I basically posted a spreadsheet of all of my teachers' salaries, and it became anonymously. And then it became a situation where, like, I remember the next day, every period, every single teacher stood in front of the room and had to justify why they were getting paid 6 figures for teaching us some of the worst AP economics of my life. And I literally was like, honestly, you're welcome. You're welcome.
But like this is a straight line from Catfish. Like the idea of like you're watching this show, you're saying, hey, this tool can teach us more about the world around us and people we know than we sort of maybe give it credit for. And to, I guess, like maybe like put a fine point on it. The internet was a different place in 2012. Like the vibes were different. The way that we sort of moved online was just a little bit different. And so was your relationship to that space. You want to talk a little bit about how the internet was different in 2012?
Absolutely. I mean, 2012, at the time, there were things like online dating. However, I would argue it was still a little stigmatized, right? So This is before Hinge and Bumble and Tinder. This is before Facebook Marketplace. This is before the idea of like making friends on Reddit and like having pizza afterwards. This was just a time where there was still a lot of stranger danger, I would say, in real life and online. And when I think about the internet back then, There's almost this naivety, but the issue is that every generation was still trying to figure out the internet. So it wasn't about being an elderly person who couldn't figure out if they were getting scammed. It was young people, parents, people in between, the sandwich generation, genuinely not knowing how to comprehend this piece of technology that was and is impacting all of our lives at a pace that they could not figure out. And the thing about Catfish is that it was one of the biggest mainstream platforms that probably taught people what the internet was for the first time. You know, MTV at the time was not, a lot of shows at the time were not having this confrontation with internet and internet culture. And this was very firmly an internet culture of like, what is it like to exist in two spaces, both in real life and online?
Right.
You know?
And I think like the maybe mind-blowing thing to remember is like Tinder didn't launch until 2013. Like there was there's sort of a no man's land of like, what do we do here when somebody's saying this is really what my picture looks like, and you got to go, I guess I believe you. And Catfish says no. You don't have to do that. I guess the other thing that was also true about this is that, you know, if the internet was a different place in 2012, so was television. Tell me about the other shows that were airing around the time that Catfish first came out.
Yeah, well, just to give you a sampling, all right, an appetizer sampler of what Catfish was dealing with at the time. MTV at the time was putting out shows like Rob Dyrdek's Fantastic Fantastic Factory, 16 and Pregnant, Teen Mom, Floribama Shore, America's Best Dance Crew, and The Real World. And Catfish outlasted all of these shows. Let that sink in.
That's a lot to take in. Yes.
Yes, and I think the reason why Catfish was able to be such a big hit is because Catfish is kind of not just a reality show. It's not only investigative journalism. It has this documentary lens, right? Yeah. Nev Schulman is the host of the show, and for a few seasons there, he hosted it with Max Joseph. Max Joseph is a pretty traditional filmmaker and he dabbles in documentary. And I think he really took this as these episodic documentaries. Every episode, Max will hold this like Canon point and shoot as like a third angle to the actual cameras. And there was something very kind of like gamified of like, we're taking it one step at a time. And even if every episode is predictable, there was something very intriguing about the premise where you were not always 100% sure you knew how this ended. Whereas a show like, let us say, America's Best Dance Crew, no shade, we knew you would find America's Best Dance Crew.
Yes, it's right there in the name. It was promised.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think that's, you know, those type of shows, Teen Mom, Rob Dyrdek's Fantastic Factory. There was something very entertainment forward about those shows. And this show, I think, was kind of MTV's prestige title. It was a little more thinky. It was a little more for the nerds or the people who wanted to get into the weeds of like the culture you're not seeing on stage, but instead behind it.
I mean, talk to sort of explicitly about Max Joseph's sort of like documentary credentials. I think like the show was explicitly trying to use the same ways that we sort of respond to documentary filmmaking to get you to respond to the developments of Catfish. You kind of go like, whoa, here comes the big reveal. We're going to find out exactly how this person gets away with this thing. And you kind of felt like you're along for the ride for like a journalistic investigation kind of reaching its apex. But of course, you know, the thing about the show is that like the stakes here are, it's not people getting scammed out of money. Sometimes it was, but most of the time it was lonely people who are being scammed out of their affection and their love. And that's what makes the show quite often like such a heartbreaking thing. One aspect of the show is like this idea of like using this investigative lens to sort of like land on this hard truth. But then you have this other thing, which is like, it's a reality show. It's got to do the job of like entertaining you. It's got to do the job of like the end of the episode, you know, ends and you can walk away and go like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And you should be able to just kind of like leave it there. That's not what we do with journalism, I think. But I want to just play you this clip from the same episode we heard earlier. This is when Spencer meets the person who's been in an online relationship with, and it's, spoiler alert, not Katy Perry, and he's got a really hard time believing it.
Dude,
No,
it's her.
I don't think it is, man.
Well, who else could it be?
I mean, really, Katy.
You can't possibly think it's still Katy Perry.
I do.
Okay, so
Whoa.
do you want to...
I mean,
Can you just pop his bubble for a second and tell him that he has not been talking to Katy Perry?
So like an investigative journalism show wouldn't take that extra step, wouldn't go like, hey, please pop his bubble. Like they have produced it, because again, it's a reality show. How do you feel about the way that the show handled the vulnerability of the people who were maybe taken advantage of here?
It's a really good question because I think in the first few seasons of Catfish, there was some criticism of, is this show exploiting regular Americans, regular people who aren't looking for fame, but are genuinely just looking to see if the person they fell in love with online for 1, 3, 5, 7 years, if they're who they say they are.
Yeah.
And I think part of the exploitative nature is the fact that you're making an episode because you know what's going to happen. You know that they're going to be heartbroken, and you are going to watch them at the rock bottom of this relationship. Yeah. And my take on Catfish as a show is that it has a very interesting tone. Like you're saying, it is produced in moments such as being leading their sources, right? Leading them on and being like, can you do this? Can you say this? On top of that, I think that this is a show that asks, what if your rom-com turned into a horror film? Because for a lot of people who come on to Catfish, the victims, they really think that they've been in this romance, this sweeping story of can you believe that I found love during this time of true turmoil? And the thing is, you're on the show because you are officially cutting tape on that film and going, Right. This is actually a horror film. This is Cronenberg now. And there is something very heartbreaking about watching that, about watching people that you are invested in truly realize that their investments and their emotional investments, that's the worst thing. You actually cannot even show how heartbreaking this is, unlike the way that someone would scam you out of money, right? There's an amount, and you can even sue on that amount. You cannot sue on the premise of love and Facebook messages, and that is heartbreaking.
I have friends who will rewatch episodes of Catfish, and I'm I can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is because I know that the thing that makes a good episode of Catfish is there's gonna be devastation and heartbreak in it, and it's really well put together. But I'm I can't revisit that, man. But to your larger point though, it's not a surprise that Catfish is getting canceled now because we're a bit savvier about the internet. But you said in your Slate article that you feel it's fitting the show is ending in 2025 when, quote, authenticity is the rarest online currency. Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, when I saw this headline that Catfish is getting canceled, I was like, you're still on, bro? That's crazy. But the reason I say that is because it's not so much that the show has changed, but the internet has outpaced the show to the point where it is rendered useless. So for me, for example, I learned how to reverse phone lookup, reverse image search, really suss out if someone is definitely scamming me pretty quickly because of the show. However, if you give your audience the tools, they're going to take the tools and do it themselves quicker. And in a way, you're kind of great. So we've just spoiled the premise of the show. However, I think the root of the show is this desire for human connection at any form, platform, method possible. And that still exists today because when I think about this idea of the catfish and what is their motivation, a lot of these episodes are about catfish who say I was bullied in high school, or I don't like the way I look, or I lack a confidence. However, I created a persona that asked, what if I looked like that person, had that person's job, walked that person's way? Who are the people that would actually be attracted to me if I lived that idealized life, this fantasy world building? And I think that we as people in 2025 still fantasy world build. It's just that we're way more transparent about it. So, for example, on Instagram, let's be honest, our Instagrams have become highlight reels of our lives that hide the stuff that we don't want to show. And even though they are technically our real bodies, technically our real faces and names, Facetune is a thing, editing is a thing, AI, that is very much a thing. And in a way, that is what makes this show almost more compelling to me in this nostalgic way of it was almost easier to scam people back then, and it is pretty easy to get scammed now. But the thing is, the internet has not changed, the thing is that people have not changed. The internet has just outpaced us, and scam culture has outpaced us. And in a weird way, humanity is still searching for that connection, even if it comes through a scam text message or phone call,
But having said all that, I think what I hear in that, honestly, is a pitch for a reverse catfish show about talking to people who do engage in catfishing. They are the people who sort of engage in the scamming and just sort of go hey, man, you're okay as you are. You don't got to make up this entire persona. And what led you to want to sort of pretend to be Katy Perry for 7 years for this person? How did we get here? Because that's closer to the source of our loneliness than the show Catfish is, because you actually got to get to the core of that, the thing that's preventing that person from being I can be myself and still seek some kind of authentic connection. But I don't think MTV is going to put on that show. Candice, what do you think?
Oh, I mean, because they're scared, Elamin. And that's why you got to do it on YouTube yourself.
Let's go.
And actually, can I give a fun fact about that episode?
Let's go.
About the guy who thinks he's in love with Katy Perry.
Yeah.
This episode is groundbreaking because they also go international. They're in the U.S. and they end up flying out to England, to Gloucester, to find this woman, Harriet, who is the real person behind Katy Perry. They have confrontations with her, with him. He eventually says, like, you know, I think it's true that she's not Katy Perry. Every episode they do an update of, like, we check in with them 2 months later. We check in with them to see what they're up to see, hopefully, that they're not catfishing anymore.
Yeah.
We find out that Spencer, the victim, did not believe them and was still emailing said Katy Perry saying, they brought out this girl and it wasn't you. That's crazy. He still believed it. And he thinks that he was punked on the show. And it's just like, man, there is a limit to the delusion. There is a limit to the delusion that Neve Schulman is willing to undertake and fix. Hey, he's not a therapist. He doesn't know what it's really like.
No, and
okay?
I think like that's the other thing you do differently is like have a therapist on standby. Go like, we're about to tell you something very difficult to hear. There's a therapist in the trailer just in case you need to talk to them because, man, you can't break people's hearts live on television and just go like, all right, that's our show, everybody. Goodbye. You know, that's it's a rough thing to do. Candice, I appreciate this. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here, friend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. It's been a delight. Candice Lim is the co-host of In Case You Missed It, Slate's podcast about internet culture. And if you must, you can stream all 9 seasons of Catfish on Paramount Plus in Canada or on Hulu in the United States.